Take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air. It's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility.
So I want to talk about this whole thing with Elon's AI Grok, and essentially how something weird happened with it, where it started spitting out weird responses about white genocide in South Africa, unprompted. So people would ask it random questions and it would respond with that. And it was this thing that kind of happened all at once. All of a sudden it kept responding in this way. So for anybody who doesn't know, Grok is the AI that is combined with Twitter, and the way it works is basically the same as ChatGPT. It's a ChatGPT competitor that's also programmed to learn from Twitter in real time. So at first it was private, and you had to pay for it, whatever Elon's fee is for paying for Twitter in general, which was always stupid. And then they decided to make it public at some point, maybe 6 months ago or less than that. I don't know. They made it so that anybody could use it. So instantly, Twitter became flooded with AI images and different stuff like that. That was the point, because the way these AIs work, at a certain point, they stop learning, they stop progressing if people aren't using them. So not only do they need an incredible amount of data to feed their models, but they also need a lot of user interaction. And so in that way, people work for these models as they're using them, because they need your interaction in order to learn from them. And that's a little bit what I want to talk about here. Because I've messed around with Grok a little bit here and there, sort of as an experiment, just to see what kind of things it does, or doesn't say. I was very curious about if it would just follow the line of narratives that Elon Musk likes to push, and if that was his objective in creating this chatbot. So they made it public, and then not only that, but they also made it so that you could interact with it on the timeline, ask it questions, right? Somebody posts something about a news article, and you can ask Grok, is this true? And then it blah, 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 blah. So that was where people started to notice these weird responses about white genocide in South Africa, and it was coming up totally unprompted in non-political conversations and saying weird things like, well, that's not exactly related to the white genocide in South Africa, is it? And then it started giving weird, confused responses, because people would ask it, why did you say that? And it would say, well, because I've been programmed to do so, or because I'm programmed to be truthful and skeptical of both sides of any narrative, which causes me to be skeptical about the white genocide story. And so it was just clear that somebody programmed it to talk about this with a pretty specific script. And obviously they fucked up, because it was bringing it up way too often, and people noticed it. And this happened sort of overnight. And I thought it was interesting because I also noticed a shift in it myself. I actually found Grok to be surprisingly accurate. And that was the most interesting thing about it to me, is that it's this, system that was mostly designed off of information from Twitter and other places on the internet. Who knows how they procure all this data. And it's owned by Elon Musk, who not only is, evil himself, but he's also aggressively pursuing a project of evil. So the idea that Grok, at least on its basic training, would do things like fact check Elon Musk and people who were pushing Elon Musk's narratives regularly was interesting to me. And I don't know about the experience of people who want Grok to agree with them, who are fans of Elon Musk, and so they over time train it to speak to them from that angle. I'm sure that it does that, but I found it on a base level to actually be relatively balanced in its answers, and usually would not give much credence at all to right-wing sources and narratives, which is pretty much the dead ringer for whether or not a system of information is accurate or not. Like, there's certain amounts of information that come from whatever right-wing media spheres, but at the end of the day, so much of their narratives are based on lies because they just don't have the same rigor when it comes to journalism. And so, aside from like big outlets like the Wall Street Journal or something, I suppose, that are like relatively regarded journalism, for the most part, from right-wing sources, you're not getting quality information. And I actually found that Grok was good at discerning that, which was what made it interesting to me. And the main thing that I found it personally useful for was finding articles, because Google is not good at that anymore. I mean, if you search a certain topic, like, Kamala Harris or something about Trump, it's going to give you the most up-to-date articles about that subject, which is good. But if you're trying to find something really specific that you don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but you know something happened in a certain time period, something that happened a while ago before the story got updated, Google's does not make it easy to find articles like that. And I found that the Grok AI was better for that. So when I did use it, I would sometimes use it for that, to find very specific things. And I didn't fully incorporate it into my process because I never really liked using it. And I also recognize that what it tells you, you kind of just have to completely ignore. You can't just read what it tells you and be like, oh, that's just information, because it doesn't have any actual system for discerning things. It's just smashing things up and reserving it to you. But that's why I found it intriguing that its data sets seem to actually bias it towards truth and not Elon Musk's twisted idea of what truth is. So that's what makes this update in the story with the whole white genocide thing quite interesting, because it makes it clear that they've been fucking with this thing. And I think that's been clear for a few weeks now, that they're frustrated by the fact that this machine fact checks right-wing narratives and it biases against right-wing news, because even the people that programmed it at a base level seem to understand that those sources do not constitute verifiable information in the same way. And so that's the dynamic they're trying to change. They're trying to change the fundamental parts of the system that decides what information to incorporate into its answers at which part of the process. And it's kind of a hilarious fuck up with how obviously they tweaked this thing, and it's just so funny to so immediately call attention to what you're doing. And for me, I consider it the conclusion to my Grok experiment, because essentially what happened, I didn't get it to say anything about white side. I never got that answer personally, but I did notice a sudden shift where I was talking about David Hogg a couple days ago, and I was trying to get more information about the DNC criticisms of David Hogg. And that's the kind of specific stuff that I find the AI is somewhat useful at finding sources about. But you have to actually go to the sources and fact check what it tells you. You can't just trust what it summarizes those sources to be saying. And it said, a couple things about how David Hogg was raising money against Democrats and they didn't like that, and that's the core of the issue. It was also making this other claim about how David Hogg was using the PAC money and he was profiting handsomely from his own PAC. And so it cited that information, and I can't remember what original source it was saying that was from. But when I went to check the other sources, like Politico and The Guardian, sources like that, I couldn't find anything about that. So I started Googling, looking for it. That specific number, it said something like $175,000 is what he had made off this PAC. And Fox had reported it. Other smaller right-wing outlets had reported it. But I wasn't seeing anything that I deemed to be legit. So I was looking around, I was Googling, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I asked Grok to give me a non-right-leaning source that has that information in it. And it gave me like a Politico article, and it said they list in this article that David Hogg was profiting from this PAC and blah, blah, blah. So I'm looking through the article trying to find that, and it's not in there. And the whole time I'm trying to find a reputable source that reported on that to see if it's true. Now, to be fair, the other sources that reported on it, like Fox, they were using an FEC filing in their reporting. So the information was accurate. The claim it was making in that case was accurate. But what it was doing was it was attributing that information to sources that never said anything about it. And so that's where I was like, what is this thing actually doing? Because it's one thing for it to get something wrong or to relay information incorrectly, but it's almost like specifically lying to me about where information is coming from. And what that tells me is that somebody's trying to reprogram it to bias those right-wing sources differently and to not bias against it when it comes to aggregating information to spit it back out to the user. And it wasn't doing that before. I'm sure on some level the programming had already been corrupted before I noticed it. But whatever happened in this latest round of updates or whatever, they did something to it that makes it much, much sloppier when it comes to relaying this information. Something shifted where they have, attempted to turn it into more of a straight up propaganda machine. And so that's why I say it's the end of my curiosity about it, because that was always what I suspected they were trying to do with Grok AI. And I found that the way it worked was actually a little different than that. But clearly it was inevitable that they were going to try to figure out how to use Grok as a propaganda machine and not something that fact checks the narratives that they want to perpetuate. And ultimately, I think that's what Elon's vision with Twitter always was. He views Twitter as an opportunity to automate a certain portion of the discourse. And I think he probably thinks that people like Zuckerberg, while they have done that, they haven't done it in a way that he views as sufficiently political. And he thinks that the smartest and the wisest and the bravest and the strongest among us, like himself, should be the ones who are programming the discourse of society. And he thinks that because of his view that white is a viable narrative that isn't reported on enough by the media, and it's true. And so he wants to make the decision for this program that it needs to be biased in that direction. And like I said, it was inevitable that he was going to use this program to that end. But above all, I suppose it's interesting to see that even as they're actively fucking with the programming of their own robots, they still can't quite get it to say that this is legit and not a made-up narrative, because there's not enough legitimate sourcing behind it. And, I think for most things that are true and accurate, you're going to be able to find solid sourcing for it. Not all the time, because there's things that happen on the ground that legitimate news sources choose not to cover. So there has to be a certain amount of discernment about that. And like I said, even the fluke that I caught in using the system, it wasn't that the reporting that was being done was incorrect. It was the fact that certain outlets weren't reporting on that and other outlets were, because other outlets had a certain lean. But what Grok did was it conflated the different sources, because clearly somebody was trying to reprogram it to hold those lesser value right-wing sources in the same esteem that it holds, mainstream recognized outlets. So just an interesting thing that I wanted to put out there, because people are talking about this Grok shit, and I don't advocate for anybody to use that or any type of AI. I don't think that it's practical. Some of it's tempting, and I think it's a matter of, the stuff that is sustainable and useful is going to still be there when all of the rest of this shit comes out in the wash. So for the most part, I think it's good to try to abstain from using that shit, because it is habit forming. Part of the point of these devices is for them to be habit forming, which is why Elon Musk is trying to corrupt it to say the things he wants it to say. And look, it's clumsy right now, but he's gonna figure out how to do that right. And it is going to become a better automated system program of right-wing media and propaganda that is legitimized by the administration and by the media infrastructure directly underneath it. And so, we're seeing the funny part of it now, but Elon Musk's project with Twitter up until now has largely been a success. Not in terms of making Twitter successful, but in terms of using Twitter as a political weapon. He has very effectively done that, and Grok and XAI are both pieces of that puzzle. And so at this point, it's very clear what he's trying to do. And so I think it's definitely time to disengage with all of these programs to the best of our ability. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of stuff there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel, book reviews, movie reviews, also music. If you like the music that plays in the back of these podcasts, all that's going to be posted there, as well as my EPs. I just dropped a new EP called Dead Internet Theory, which is now available on all platforms, but it was available first for members only. So if you want early access to future music and projects like that, become a member. And if there's other stuff that you would like to see as members only content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.